Hi, it's Miss Sherry. Since before I left to come down to the pole, I've been taking my blood oxygen using a small fingertip sensor that I bought on Amazon. This sensor just fits right over your finger and uses light to figure out what your blood oxygen content is. It takes a few seconds and it'll give you a digital readout. So I was wondering what happens as you change altitude. I know that at the South Pole, one of the big problems is that your blood oxygen content changes. Here mine's at 93. It's pretty good for today. When I was at home in Washington, D.C., every day I was reading 98 on that top number. The bottom number there is your beats per minute, or your pulse rate. So I asked Dr. Mark here at the South Pole if he could explain to me what's going on with your blood and with this number and why it changes so much when you hit the South Pole.
Katie, first let me start by telling you that the problem here at the South Pole is that the oxygen level is lower than what you expect in Washington, D.C. That's predominantly related to the altitude and the shifts in the pressure here at the South Pole that are very unique to the South Pole.
Atmospheric pressure decreases as you increase in elevation. That's because the density of the air molecules around you decreases. You've probably noticed this as you take off in an airplane. Even though the cabin is pressurized, you still feel a pressure change as you take off and as you land in your inner ears. This is especially amplified at the North and South Pole, where the atmosphere happens to be reduced further.
But the bottom line is that the amount of oxygen in the environment is lower. So if you were to check your saturation as you have at home, you'd find that it run 98%, but you were quite surprised to find that it was 90% or lower at times here. And what's happening is because the pressure, the amount of oxygen in the air is lower, the amount of oxygen that's on the hemoglobin molecule in your blood is lower. Now you might ask what the hemoglobin molecule is, and that's a protein that carries oxygen through your blood in your red blood cells. And there's all kinds of adaptations that occur as you arrive at South Pole, and the longer you stay, the more those adaptations start taking effect. What happens initially is you feel more short of breath, sometimes dizzy and lightheaded, but as your body begins to compensate, the way the hemoglobin holds on to the oxygen begins to change, and it's called a shift in the hemoglobin curve.
So this is the curve showing oxygen's ability to bind to hemoglobin at different pressures. The blue line is normal, and you can see that as we move into lower pressures, like 50 and below, we're having a harder time binding hemoglobin and oxygen together, so you have lower percent saturation of oxyhemoglobin. When you're at altitude for a while, we have a left shift in this curve, so we move towards the green line where we have higher binding percentages at those same lower pressures.
So what that really translates to is it gets easier for you to carry the amount of oxygen that's in the environment. Your body gets more efficient with carrying the lower amount of oxygen, hence you adapt to the environment.
So you don't make more hemoglobin at first, you're just carrying the oxygen on the hemoglobin molecule differently.
That's correct. It'll take, although there are signals right from the very beginning for your body to start trying to make more hemoglobin, that takes a bit of time for your bone marrow and the different processing sites to start adapting. So it could take weeks for you to actually have your hemoglobin change.